Good morning, welcome to my kitchen. So this morning I'm going to show you how to do the very well-known Battenberg cake, which is an almond flavoured cake, generally with two colours, pink and yellow, and it is encased in marzipan on the outside. So the ingredients we're going to use this morning are 175 grams of soft butter and 175 caster sugar, 3 eggs that are going to get beaten with a fork, just medium-sized eggs, 140 grams of self-raising flour, 50 grams of ground almonds, going to have half a teaspoon of baking powder and half a teaspoon of vanilla extract and 1/4 teaspoon of almond extract. And I have a tin prepared, and you'll notice with the tin I have made a sort of dividing line in the middle, because one half of the cake is going to obviously be pink and one half is going to be the yellow. And all I did to do that was I literally put a little fold in the paper, a crease in the paper, and then have left it like that. Okay, so I've got the two different colours. So to start this recipe, what we're going to do is we're going to be creaming together the butter and the sugar. I'm just going to be using an electric hand mixer. That's going to get creamed till it's really light. It's going to take on lots of air. It's going to become quite pale in colour and very soft. Then I'm gradually going to start to add my beaten eggs, being very careful that I allow that to be incorporated well. Each time I'm adding a little bit of egg in to prevent it from splitting. Then I'm going to fold in my sieved self-raising flour. I'm not going to sieve my ground almonds because they are actually quite rough, but I actually quite like that, so I'm going to leave them as they are, but you could sieve it if you wish. And then I'm going to add my baking powder in with the self-raising flour. Then I'm going to add my 2 flavourings at the end. So to start with, I'm going to put my mix on. You can see, increased in volume. I'm going to carry on with that and then start to add my eggs, which I've just cracked into the jug and beaten slightly with a fork. And every now and again, just get yourself a scraper. Just make sure that any mixture that's on the side of the bowl is put back into the centre to make sure it's fully incorporated. Okay, and again, when you're adding the eggs, only add little bits at a time and make sure that's fully incorporated into the mixture before you add the next lot. what we should end up with. All of the egg in. Dribble left, that's all. Okay. That's all in there. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add in my self-raising flour and my baking powder. So I've got a self-raising flour in here, and I've got half a teaspoon, you can just see it there, half a teaspoon of baking powder in there as well. Okay, so with a fine sieve, I'm going to sieve that into the mixture. Obviously just gets rid of any lumps, and it will obviously aerate the flour as well, which is what we want. I'm going to keep this bowl though, because I'm going to colour my sponge pink and yellow. So this bowl I'm going to use for one of the sponge mixtures. So I'm going to divide the sponge in half. Okay, so I'm not going to put that one for washing up just yet. Okay, I'm going to take that off here because the next part of the mixing I'm going to do by hand using a plastic spatula. Okay, so there we are. That's my mixture. I've got the flour, the self-raising flour and the baking powder in. So I'm now just going to incorporate that. And remember what we said about sponges when we're doing this method is that the air goes in that first stage when you're beating the butter and the sugar, and it also gets incorporated in when you're adding your eggs. But at this stage, I don't want to overwork it now. I'm not developing the gluten in the flour. So I want to make this mixing just efficient. I want it to incorporate into the mixture, but I don't want to over-mix it. Okay? So that, for example, is enough. Okay? Now I've got my ground almonds, which I'm going to add in now. Okay. And then the only things I've got left to add now are my vanilla essence, half a teaspoon, and then a quarter of a teaspoon of almond essence. That's because it's quite a lot stronger. This one is my almond. Full one with my vanilla. Okay, so again, I don't want to be over mixing this, but I just want to make sure that's all in for the mixture evenly. You can see the air pockets in there, which is good. A light sponge. Okay, right, so that's my mixture. Now I need to divide it into two because I've got one that's going to be pinky coloured and I'm going to have one that is yellow. So I'm just going to estimate this as half in each. I think that's probably about right, so maybe a tiny bit more into that one. Okay, so I'm going to be using these gel colours, which of course, if you're adding liquid colouring, like you get in the bottles like these, they're not very concentrated, and you have to add quite a lot for them to get the colours. This obviously comes out like that. But remember, obviously every time you use one of these, just make sure your teaspoon is thoroughly clean. You don't want to contaminate the rest of the colouring. Okay, so I've got to mix that in as well as I can. Okay, I think with the lighting in here it's quite difficult to see that, but that is a kind of nice light, it's got a light yellow tinge to it. It's going to be quite in contrast to the other one. Okay, so I'm going to leave that one there. And then I'm going to add in and then I've got the poppy red. With that one you can instantly see the change in colour. Just make sure that colouring is thoroughly mixed in. Okay, now I'm quite happy with that colour. It's got a nice vibrancy to it. It's going to contrast nicely with the yellow one. Okay, so now I've got my tin. So you can see I've put a crease in the paper. I'm just going to shift that ever so slightly. And all I did was just put a crease in the centre. It's the easiest way of doing it, so that the sponges, and I think that's pretty much in half. So obviously just line your tin as well with just a little bit of margarine or something, just to get the paper to stick. Okay, now I've got to be adding I want to make sure I get all of this, every last little bit. The oven is set about 175. I should have really told you that at the beginning. And that is preheated, so that's on. It's been on for the last 10 or 15 minutes. It's up to temperature, which of course is very important when you're making cakes and sponges. And I'll spread this out. I've obviously got a small cranked handle palette knife, as you can see, and a small one because I'm only making a small amount of mixture. Quite happy with that. Okay, now I've got to mix in just make sure that yellow one is thoroughly mixed through. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So now this one, the yellow one, gets put into this side. And again, all of the mixture, don't waste any. It's all expensive commodities that we've used. Again, cranked handle palette knife. So there's our sponges, ready to go in the oven. 175 degrees until baked, so they will, when I press the top, they will, it will go down, but it will come back up, spring back up. so with the Battenberg, we've got the one yellow sponge and we've got the one pink one. Okay, so all I've done is I've trimmed this one off slightly, the yellow one, because it's a little bit deeper. So all I want is the sponges to be the same size, so when I put them together, they're going to be ready. So what we've got is warmed apricot jam, and I've got a nice clean pastry brush that I'm going to be using for that. Okay, all I did with that was take the jam out of the jar, put it in here, and I've just let it down with a little bit of water, brought it to the boiler. As you can see, it's quite hot. So that's going to stick the sponges together. I've got marzipan ready to go, rolling pin ready. I've got icing sugar in here. I've got a serrated knife, which is the best knife to cut this with, and I've also got a palette knife, which is actually... Okay, so the last little bit of marzipan I've got, I'm just going to use it for this small one that could just be for like for a small afternoon tea. Okay. So again, just try and keep your hands crumb free if you can. Marzipan's an expensive commodity because obviously it's made of ground almonds and they're expensive. So try and use all you can. Don't waste any. It doesn't. You need to really put it in vacuum pack it or put it in a sealed container because it dries out very quickly and go quite hard at the edges and make it quite difficult for you to use. So make sure I say it really needs to be vacuum packed or put in a sealed container to make sure that it stays in good condition. I think that's good enough. A little bit thinner on this one because obviously this is the smaller one. Okay, now same again as we did before. The thing is, if you were doing this in a, if you were making something like this in a hotel as part of an afternoon tea, then you'd make sure that you use all, don't waste any, because it could always be as a garnish for something, or say on an afternoon tea or a petit four or something like that. So that's my little one. I'm just going to trim that off in a second, give my border clean, and I'll show you how I'm going to cut it. Okay, so you can sometimes use crimpers on the edge of your Battenberg, a bit like this. So just sort of crimp the edge. I'll just show you, these aren't my favourite ones, and they're not the ones that I normally use, but the ones I normally use are at work and I can't go to work, so I'm going to try with these. I'm not sure whether they're going to be. So all I've done is it just crimps the edge like that. Okay, it's not as nice as the ones I normally use. Okay, but it gives you the idea of a way of finishing it off. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a bit of a pattern on the top. Cutting all the way through. I'm just doing kind of 1 centimetre just scoring it, the diagonal. So again with this, just consider where you're going before you go there. Okay. And then I'm going to do it the opposite way. Okay, so that's the larger one of the two. Now this one is the little one I made, just for the extra bits of sponge. I do need to just trim off the edges just to get that nice and neat. Okay, normally you'd leave this to kind of sort of set a little bit before you go cutting it. Okay, but you can see how it looks. Rather nice. Okay. Again with this edge bit, but only take the minimum off, because obviously the more you take off, that's your profit, isn't it? So take the minimum, just to tidy that up. I'm going to leave that one like that. Okay. The larger one, if you were cutting it for, say, to put on an afternoon tea, you'd probably be looking at probably something like that. Okay, so I'm just going to take one slice, serrated knife, sawing action, and there we are. We have our Battenberg cake completed, and we have another small one as well.